and welcome back. Well, we do have our material selected in this swatch here, but I'd like to actually select the swatch next to it, because this time what I want to do is actually select colour within the diffuse area. So left click on the diffuse area there, and we're going to select a colour. We've selected something in that range. Now of course we could make it lighter or darker, and if we wanted we could also modify it either in the red channel or the green channel, the blue channel, maybe the hue and the saturation and the value. So we can modify that in many different ways within these areas here. So we're going to select OK. Now you'll notice that we still have this material in this enlarged swatch here. That's because it relates to that swatch. So let's close that down, and now let's double click with the left mouse key on that one. Okay, so with our sphere here with our nice sort of purplish colour, but let's have a look at the specular levels or the specular highlights here. We've got specular level there, it's set at 0 at the moment. I want to increase that. There we go. So it's put a nice sort of bloom around the area. What about glossiness though? Well, if we increase the glossiness, what that does is reduces the bloom and concentrates it within the area there to make it look as though it's far more glossy. And we can soften that with this. Alright, let's give it a high value. As you can see, softening it there. Let's zero that and just take it up to 0.1 again. Now let's have a look at the specular colour here. Left click on that one, and I'm going to replace that with a nice warm yellow colour. Say OK, and as we can see it's replaced the white light for this nice warm yellow light. We could of course make it less opaque, so be looking a little bit like glass. Therefore let's pop into our background and look at our opacity. Let's reduce that, and there we are. Let's whack that back up. Now what we have down here is something called maps, and it's in here where we can really start to make some changes to our materials. If we had an image, then they would be stored in the diffuse colour here, and if there was one for the specular colour, then it would be in there. We want to have a look at bump. Now at the moment there's no image selected, but we can, if we wish, select an image, and we're going to do that by clicking this button here. Let's click that, and we'll look for a bump map in this material browser here. Let's pop down. Now we can see things where it says bump map diffuse colour, but I'm looking for something with a little bit more definition. Well, let's have a look. Here we go, bump map. It's one where it's black on white. Let's select that one, double click. Now as we can see, we now have some definition. It looks as though it's actually raised from the surface, and that's what a bump map does. Now having selected the bump map, it's taken us up an additional layer, and now we're in our coordinates. We can look at the parameters, the tiling of our bump map. Now remember when I said, well, let's look at the tiling. Up here, sample UV tiling. At the moment we've got one tile, and that's all that is there. So let's look and see what it would be like with 2x2 tiles. Fine. 3x3 and 4x4. Okay, well this is just a sample of what the tiling will be like, and we can see that it's quite good. There's no real sort of areas where it doesn't look ununified. So therefore we could increase our tiling here. At the moment it's set to 1, but we can change that. We might want it 2 tiles in this direction but only 1 in that direction. And of course we could also look at cropping that tile. So we'd view the image, that's the image, and we could crop it. Say we wanted just that section there. Now that we've selected it, say apply. Okay, we don't want to apply it. Let's just take that back, pull it down to there, and there we go. Now as I said, it's moved us up a level, so what we need to do is go back down. So we come up here, press that icon there, and it says go back to parent, and it takes us back to this section here. So now it's put a check on our bump, and that's for our bump map, and the amount value is set at 30. We can change that. We could decrease it if we wish, and as you can see it becomes less defined, or we could increase it, more defined. Now believe me when I say that we haven't even scratched the surface of what the material editor can do. Okay, well let's pop back up. In fact, what I want to do is select our metal rust for now. Let's close this one down and let's open this one back up. So obviously we now know that we can adjust the specular level, and if we go in adjusting the specular level and glossiness, we see that if we pop down and have a look at the maps, here we go, we can see that there is a map in the diffuse color, in the specular color, and in the bump, and it's the bump which is creating this texture here. Well, let's now close these down for a moment. Close that one down as well. I'm going to zoom out for a bit and let's look at creating some geometry. We'll start off with a box. Just drag that out, pull it up. While we're there, we'll convert this to an editable poly, pop back into our create panel, create a sphere. Again, now it's created, let's right click, convert to editable poly, back into create, let's go for a cylinder, drag that out, up, there we go, right click, convert to an editable poly. I'm going to press M on the keyboard to bring up our material editor, pull it over here for a moment, and we've got a third swatch there, so I'm going to select that one. Going to get a material, and this time I want the metal plate. Do I want that one, or which looks, that one will do. Double click, so that's now selected. Let's close our map browser down now. So how do we actually apply these materials to our geometry? Couldn't be simpler. We could simply grab the material and apply it, or we could select that and say select that, and let's go assign the material. Now I actually use both, so there we go, let's apply that to there. Now it is important to note that you won't get an accurate representation here in the viewport. You don't really get that until you pop up to render and go render, and even then we can affect changes as to the outcome through what we do in our rendering options. Nevertheless, you can still edit your materials whilst they are still assigned to the geometry. Let me just close that down for a moment and close that down. So if we had that material there, we could open the swatch. Now it may not be showing everything here in the viewport. I say the more realistic representation is what you're going to see here in your swatch. And as I say, we can continue editing this even though it's been applied to the materials. But if it is applied to the geometry, it will update those changes in all the geometry. But let's say I didn't want that to happen. I wanted this sort of material, I wanted to make a few adjustments to it, but I didn't want it to affect all the pieces of geometry. Well, let's just have a look at that problem. What we're going to do is pop into our create, and we'll create another box. Let's bring that out there and there. Now what I would like is for this material to be applied, but I want to make some modifications to that material. Not a problem, let's simply grab it and put it into a new swatch. Okay, so it's now basically made a copy of it, but it still has the same name. So let's just sling that there, put 4 in. We're on swatch 4, so press that. Now let's apply this material to that piece of geometry there. Okay, so at the moment it has all the same attributes, but let's say now I want to make some changes to it. Well, let's have a look at the diffuse color. I want to have a look at a blue. Yeah, that'll be fine, and say OK. So there we go. We can copy any of these materials over into a new swatch, make modifications to them, and apply those to our geometry. Now I could also do a similar operation if I were to select a new swatch and select our eyedropper down here. So I've got the eyedropper. What I want to do is select that material layer, and there we go. We have a copy of it, and we could affect any changes that we like. Make the glossiness up there, the specular level. So make changes and it will be affected on a new piece of geometry. Okay, well, mindful of the time, we'll continue this in the next session. I'll catch you later.